I stood barefoot on the ice, the -10-degree wind biting my skin like a wild animal. Inside, they laughed and toasted, celebrating as if I had never existed. Just as my knees buckled, headlights sliced through the storm. A silver-haired woman stepped out of a black sedan, looking at that house like it was garbage. She spoke one soft word that shattered my world. Revoked. My name is Lila Hudson, and for 32 years, I have apologized for taking up space. It is a habit I picked up early, like biting my nails or looking at the floor when someone speaks to me. I work as a compliance officer at Cedar and Lark Holdings in Chicago. It is a job that suits me perfectly because it is entirely about rules. You check the boxes, you make sure everything is in its right place. You ensure that no one crosses a line that might bring the whole structure crashing down. My life in Chicago is beige, safe, and silent. But every year, on December 24th, I drive 5 hours north to Frostwood, Minnesota, to remind myself exactly why I am the way I am. Frostwood is not the kind of town you see on Hallmark cards. It is a hard, jagged place where the wind comes off the lakes with the specific intention of hurting you. The house my father built sits on a wind-battered hill, an architectural attempt at dominance that just looks lonely. It is a drafty wooden thing that creaks in the night. Driving up that winding driveway, with the snow tires of my compact sedan crunching over the ice, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. It is a physical reaction, a rejection. My body knows I should not be here. My brain, however, is wired to a circuit of guilt and obligation that I have never been able to cut. I walked in at 6 in the evening. The house smelled of pine needles, expensive cologne, and judgment. My father, Cal Hartman, stood by the fireplace. He is a man who has spent his entire life curating the image of the stoic, provider patriarch. He wears cable-knit sweaters that cost more than my rent and holds a tumbler of scotch like a weapon. He didn't hug me. He never hugs me. He just looked at my coat, a sensible gray wool trench that had wrinkled during the long drive. "You look like you slept in a dumpster." "Lila," he said. That was his greeting. No Merry Christmas. Just an immediate assessment of my failure to meet his visual standards. I hung the coat up. "Hello, Dad." Lynn, my stepmother, floated out of the kitchen. Lynn is a woman who treats life like a performance art piece where the audience is always watching. She was wearing a red velvet dress that was too tight and too festive. Her smile plastered on with a fixative that seemed likely to crack if she stopped beaming for even a second. "Oh, Lila, you made it," she said, her voice an octave higher than natural. "We were worried you would get lost. Again." I have never gotten lost driving to this house, not once, but in the Hartman narrative, I am the incompetent one. I am the one who needs direction. Then there was Mason. My half-brother sat on the leather sofa, bathed in the artificial glow of a ring light he had set up near the tree. Mason is 24 and describes his occupation as a content creator. To me, he looks like a boy playing dress-up in a man's arrogance. He was speaking into his phone, his voice dropping into that fake, smooth baritone he uses for his followers, just waiting on the fam for the big dinner. "Guys, it is all about gratitude tonight, all about love." He glanced up at me, his eyes dead flat, then looked back at the screen and winked. We sat down to dinner an hour later. This is the ritual, the torture chamber disguised as a holiday meal. The table was set with the good china, the silver that Lynn spends days polishing, and a roast that looked dry even before Cal carved it. "So," Cal started, sawing into the meat. "Still at that paper-pushing job, what is it, Cedar and Lark?" "It is a compliance firm. Dad, I analyze risk." "Risk," he scoffed. He laughed, a short barking sound. "You analyze risk. That is rich. You are the most risk-averse person I have ever met. Lila, you are afraid of your own shadow. You are 32 years old, and you are essentially a ghost in a cubicle." I cut my potatoes. I did not look up. "I am a senior analyst." "Actually, senior analyst," Mason mimicked, his mouth full. "That sounds like code for nobody knows who I am." Lynn tittered. tapping her wine glass. Now, boys, be nice. Lila is doing her best. Not everyone can have Mason's charisma. The air in the room was stifling. It was not just the heat from the oversized fireplace. It was the pressure. The air pressure in that house always felt like being at the bottom of the ocean. I took a sip of water. My hand was shaking. Just a tiny tremor. But Cal saw it. He sees everything that makes you weak. Look at her, Cal said, gesturing with his fork, shaking. Cannot even hold a glass of water without vibrating. It is embarrassing. Lila, honestly, I tell people my daughter is coming to visit, and I have to brace myself for the inevitable disappointment. You walk in here looking like a vagrant. You have no husband, no prospects, and a job that sounds like a punishment. You are a blemish on this family. I put the glass down. The water rippled. I felt something snap. It was not a loud snap. It was not a cinematic explosion. It was the quiet sound of a very old, very frayed rope finally giving way. I had driven 5 hours through a blizzard for this. I had spent $2,000 on gifts that were sitting under the tree. Gifts I knew they would return or re-gift. I had taken time off from a job where I was respected, where I was competent, to come here and be treated like a dirty secret. I looked at Cal. I looked him right in the eyes. I think that is enough. I said. The table went silent. Mason stopped chewing. Lynn froze with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. Cal stared at me, his face turning a shade of purple that usually preceded a shouting match. "Excuse me," Cal said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I said that is enough," I repeated. My voice did not shake. It was steady, cold, and flat. I drove here to spend Christmas with my family. I did not drive here to be your punching bag. I have a career. I have a life. And I'm done sitting at this table letting you pick the meat off my bones just to make yourself feel like a big man. Cal stood up. His chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. "You watch your mouth in my house. It is always your house, isn't it?" I said, standing up too. "It is never a home. It is just your stage." "You ungrateful little brat," Cal spat. "After everything I have done for you, after the money I wasted on your schooling, you are a failure. Lila. A total, complete failure. You only exist because I allow it." And there it was. The truth he usually kept hidden behind layers of passive aggression. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel fear. I felt exhaustion. I felt a deep, profound boredom with his cruelty. "I am no longer asking for permission to exist," I said. The silence that followed that sentence was absolute. It hung in the air for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then Cal exploded. "He did not hit me. He is too smart for that. He knows bruises leave evidence. Instead, he moved with the terrifying speed of a man possessed by rage. He rounded the table, grabbed my upper arm in a grip that felt like a blood pressure cuff tightened by a machine, and hauled me toward the back door. "Get out," he snarled. "Dad, stop," I said, stumbling. My socks slipped on the polished wood. "You want to be independent? You want to exist on your own? Go exist somewhere else." He dragged me through the kitchen. Lynn was saying something, a weak protest that sounded more like she was worried about the neighbors hearing than about my safety. Cal ignored her. He kicked the back door open. The storm greeted us instantly, a wall of white noise and freezing needles. He shoved me. I flew backward, my feet tangling, and landed hard on the frozen wooden slats of the back porch. The impact jarred my teeth. The cold was instant, a shock that sucked the air right out of my lungs. Cal turned back to the mudroom. He grabbed my coat from the hook and threw it. He did not hand it to me. He threw it like you throw a bag of trash into a dumpster. It landed in a heap on the snowy steps, half in the drift, half on the wood. Then he grabbed my boots. He tossed them out, one by one. One hit my shoulder. The other skidded off the deck and landed in the deep snow below. "Merry Christmas, Lila," he said. He slammed the door. I heard the heavy metallic clunk of the deadbolt sliding home. I sat there for a moment, stunned. The wind howled around the corners of the house, screaming like a banshee. I was wearing thick wool socks, dress pants, and a thin cashmere sweater. That was it. The temperature was -10 degrees Celsius, but with the wind chill, it felt like the atmosphere was trying to peel the skin off my bones. I scrambled up, my hands already numb, and grabbed my coat. I pulled it on over my shaking frame, buttoning it with fingers that felt like clumsy sausages. I found one boot. I jammed my foot into it. I looked for the other one, but it was gone, buried somewhere in the dark, swirling white below the deck railing. I was one-booted, shivering, and locked out. I went to the door. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked. Dad. No answer. I moved to the large picture window that looked into the dining room. I could see them. It was like watching a silent movie. Cal was sitting back down, smoothing his napkin over his lap. He said something to Mason, and Mason laughed. It was a cruel, easy laugh. Lynn was pouring more wine. Her face flushed. She threw her head back and laughed too. A wide, open-mouthed guffaw that looked grotesque from where I was standing. Mason picked up his phone. He held it up, panning the camera across the table. Then to the roast, then to Cal, and finally to Lynn. They waved. They toasted. The caption on his live stream probably read, "Perfect holiday or family goals." They were eating. They were drinking. They were warm. And they had erased me. I stood there, my one sock soaking up the melted snow on the deck, turning into a block of ice against my skin. The cold was not just uncomfortable anymore. It was aggressive. It bit into my ears, my nose, my exposed fingers. My breath came in short, shallow gasps that vanished instantly in the gale. Why? The question hammered inside my skull. Why do I do this? Why do I come back every single year to be ground into dust? I am a professional. I manage compliance for a billion-dollar company. I have friends in Chicago who would have loved to have me for dinner, but I drove here. I drove here to be locked out in a blizzard like a stray dog. I shivered so hard my teeth clacked together. The pain in my foot was turning into a dull, throbbing absence of sensation. That was bad. I knew enough about hypothermia to know that when the pain stops, the damage begins. I looked at the glass. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, I was dying. It was not a metaphor. If I stayed here, if I could not get to my car, if I could not find my keys which were in my purse, inside the house I would freeze to death. They knew my keys were inside. They knew. Tears pricked my eyes, but the wind dried them instantly, leaving sting marks on my cheeks. I felt a wave of humiliation so potent it almost warmed me. I was 32, and I was being disciplined like a child, endangered like an animal. I turned away from the window. I could not watch them anymore. I looked out into the darkness of the driveway. The storm was thick, a swirling vortex of white that erased the world beyond 10 feet. I had to find a rock. I had to break a window. I had to get back inside, even if it meant they called the police. But then, I saw it, through the whiteout. 2 beams of light cut through the darkness. They were not the yellow, dim lights of the local pickup trucks. These were crisp, blue-white LED beams, sharp as scalpels. A vehicle was moving up the long, winding driveway. It moved smoothly, ignoring the drifts, ignoring the ice. It was a long, black car, a sedan, but stretched, heavy, and armored. It looked like a predator gliding through the deep ocean. It pulled up to the base of the porch steps, the engine purring with a low, menacing rumble that vibrated in the floorboards beneath my frozen feet. This car did not belong in Frostwood. It did not belong in this tax bracket. It did not belong in this reality. I stood frozen, one boot on, one boot off, clutching my coat collar. The rear door of the car opened. I watched, shivering, as a figure emerged from the back seat. The wind whipped her hair, but she stood straight, unbothered by the gale. I did not know it yet, but the woman stepping out of that car was about to change the temperature of my life forever. The cold was about to shift. I waited. The driver moved with the silent, fluid lethality of a bodyguard who is paid not to speak but to handle problems. He rounded the back of the long black vehicle. his shoes crunching on the packed snow with a rhythm that sounded like heavy machinery. He opened the rear door, shielding the interior from the biting wind with his own massive frame. A cane touched the ground first. It was not a medical device. It was an accessory of command. Ebony wood capped with silver. Then came a black leather boot, polished to a mirror shine that seemed offensive in this rugged, dirty weather. The woman who emerged was tall. Even in the slouch of the blizzard, she stood with a spinal alignment that defied the gale. She wore a coat that likely cost more than the entire mortgage of the house behind me, a structured thing of dark wool and fur that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. Her hair was struck silver, pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. Her face was a map of sharp angles and terrifying intelligence, unlined by worry, but etched with authority. She looked at me. She did not look through me, the way Cal did. She did not look at me with pity, the way the townspeople did. She looked at me with a recognition so intense it felt like a physical impact. "Lila," she said. The name cut through the wind. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. I stood there, shivering violently, balancing on my one booted foot. My brain was firing slowly, sluggish from the cold, trying to retrieve a file from the archives of my memory that had been corrupted years ago. I knew this face. I had seen it in a single photograph my mother had kept hidden inside a hollowed-out book. A photograph Cal had found when I was 12. He had torn it into confetti while I screamed. "You are dead," I whispered, my teeth chattering so hard the words were barely intelligible. "My father told me you died in a plane crash in the Andes. He told me there was no body. He told me you were gone." The woman stepped closer. She ignored the ice slick on the driveway. She ignored the -10-degree temperature. She walked right up to the edge of the porch steps where I was trembling. Her eyes, the color of frozen iron, swept over me. They took in the wet sock, the missing boot, the thin coat, the blue tinge of my lips. For a second, the iron in her eyes melted into something agonizingly human. It was pain, pure, raw pain. She reached out a gloved hand and touched my cheek. Her leather glove was warm. "Is this how they treat you?" she asked. Her voice was low, a vibrato of suppressed rage. "Is this what they did to Marin's daughter?" I could not answer. My throat was frozen shut. The pain in her eyes vanished, replaced instantly by a glacial fury that was far more terrifying than my father's hot temper. She turned away from me, her movement sharp and military. She looked up at the house, through the window. The scene was still playing out. Mason was laughing at his phone. Lynn was swaying with her wine glass. Cal was likely pontificating about his own greatness. They were oblivious to the predator standing on their lawn. The woman turned to the driver, who was standing at attention by the car's fender. "Execute the recall," she said. It was not a scream. It was a toggle switch. The driver nodded and spoke into a lapel microphone. "Go." The reaction was instantaneous. It was as if the darkness around the curve of the driveway had been holding its breath, waiting for her command. Headlights flooded the property, not one pair, but 6, 7, 8. A convoy of vehicles roared around the bend, their engines screaming as they surged up the hill. There were 2 police cruisers with their light bars flashing silently, painting the snow in strobes of red and blue. There were 3 black SUVs identical to the one the woman had arrived in, and there was a white van with the logo of a structural engineering firm on the side. They swarmed the driveway. Car doors slammed in unison, a percussion section of justice. Men and women in dark suits spilled out of the SUVs, carrying briefcases and tablets. Uniformed officers stepped out of the cruisers, hands resting on their belts, faces impassive. A team of men in hard hats and high-visibility vests jumped out of the van, carrying laser measuring tools and clipboards. It looked like a raid. It looked like an invasion. The woman, my grandmother, Evelyn Wexford, did not move. She stood like a general on a hill, watching her troops advance. "Get her warm," she ordered the driver, gesturing to me without looking away from the house. The driver was beside me in a second. He draped a heavy thermal blanket over my shoulders, the weight of it nearly buckling my knees. He guided me off the steps, away from the house, toward the warmth of the lead car. But I dug my heels in. I did not want to sit in the car. I wanted to see this. I needed to see this. I am okay. I managed to say, I want to watch. Evelyn glanced at me, a flicker of approval in her eyes. Good. Watch closely. Lila, this is how the real world works. The front door of the house flew open. Lynn was the first one out. She was still holding her wine glass, her face flushed with alcohol and confusion. She stumbled onto the porch, squinting into the blinding array of headlights. What is going on? She shrieked. Who are you people? You are trespassing. This is private property. Mason was right behind her. He had his phone held high, the ring light attached to it casting a grotesque halo around his face. He was live streaming. I could see the scrolling chat on his screen reflecting in his glasses. Yo, guys, this is insane, Mason narrated, his voice cracking. The cops are here. Some random convoy just rolled up on our crib. This is harassment. I am getting this all on tape. Then Cal appeared. He pushed past Lynn and Mason, his chest puffed out, his face a mask of indignant fury. He looked like a king whose castle had been insulted. What the hell is the meaning of this? He bellowed. I know the sheriff. I will have every one of your badges. Get off my land. A man in a charcoal gray suit stepped forward from the group of lawyers. He was holding a thick file folder. He walked up the porch steps, unbothered by Cal's shouting, and stopped 2 feet from my father. Mr. Calvin Hartman, the lawyer asked. His voice was bored, professional. Of course I am Calvin Hartman. Get off my property. The lawyer opened the folder. He pulled out a document stamped with a red seal. I am afraid you are mistaken. Mr. Hartman, this is not your property. Cal froze. What are you talking about? I built this house. I paid for it. You built a structure. Yes, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. However, the land this structure sits on, Parcel 402, Frostwood District, is titled to the Wexford Family Trust. Cal laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. You are crazy. My wife left me this land. Marin left it to me. The lawyer flipped a page. Mrs. Marin Wexford Hartman did not have the authority to leave you the land. Sir, the land was held in a generation-skipping trust. Upon her death, the beneficiary rights transferred to her issue, her daughter, Lila Hudson. However, the deed contains a specific clause regarding the guardianship of the asset. Cal was turning pale. The bluster was leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, relentlessly, you signed a 99-year lease agreement with the trust 20 years ago to maintain residence here. That lease has strict clauses regarding the maintenance of the property and the moral conduct of the tenants. He looked at the structural engineers who were already walking around the perimeter of the house, shining flashlights at the foundation and taking photos. We have evidence of unapproved structural modifications. We have evidence of failure to maintain insurance standards. And, as of 5 minutes ago, we have visual confirmation of the endangerment of the primary beneficiary, Ms. Lila Hudson, which constitutes a violation of the moral turpitude clause. Lynn screamed. It was a high, thin sound. You cannot do this. We have rights. Squatters' rights. Something. The lawyer looked at her with disdain. You have exactly 0 rights. Mrs. Hartman, you are in default. The trust has exercised its option to revoke the lease immediately. Revoke. I thought. The word echoed in my head. Mason shoved his phone into the lawyer's face. Say that to the camera. Bro, you are evicting a family on Christmas Eve. You are monsters. The internet is going to cancel you. The lawyer smiled. It was a shark's smile. I would advise you to stop streaming. Mr. Hartman, the lawyer said softly, you are currently documenting your father's admission of trespassing and your own complicity in the abuse of the property owner. Everything you are recording will be subpoenaed as evidence against you. Mason stopped. He looked at the phone screen. The comments were probably not going the way he expected. He lowered the phone, his face draining of color. Cal was trembling now. He looked around at the police officers, who were standing with their arms crossed. making it clear they were there to enforce the eviction, not stop it. He looked at the engineers tagging his house. He looked at the black SUVs. Then, his eyes found the woman standing next to the lead car. Evelyn stepped forward into the pool of light. Cal squinted. He blinked. He took a step back, his heel catching on the doorframe. He looked like he was seeing a specter. "No," Cal whispered. Evelyn walked up the driveway. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at him. The height difference did not matter. She towered over him. "Hello, Cal," she said. Cal's mouth opened and closed. No, it is not possible. You are dead. I have the certificate. I have the letters. You died in 98. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. A forgery is easy to buy if you know the right people in South America. Cal, you of all people should know how easy it is to fake a document. Why? Cal croaked. Why? Because I knew what you were, Evelyn said. Her voice was conversational, terrifyingly calm. I knew that as long as I was alive, you would play the part of the perfect husband and the grieving widower. You would hide your rot. I had to become a ghost. Cal, I had to disappear so I could watch what you would do when you thought no one was looking. She pointed a gloved finger at me, shivering under the blanket. I watched you isolate her. I watched you spend the money I left for her education on your bad investments and your new wife's wardrobe. I watched you break her spirit bit by bit. I waited. Cal, I waited for you to make a mistake big enough to bury you. She lowered her hand. And tonight, you locked the heir to the Wexford fortune outside in a blizzard to freeze to death while you ate roast beef. Cal looked at me. For the first time, he did not look at me with contempt. He looked at me with fear. Evelyn turned to the police chief, who had just walked up. Chief, Evelyn said, I believe this man is trespassing on my property, and I would like to file charges for reckless endangerment. The chief nodded, touching the brim of his hat. Yes, ma'am. Cal lunged. It was a desperate, stupid move. He came down the stairs, his hands reaching for Evelyn, perhaps thinking he could strangle the ghost back into the grave. You bitch, he screamed. You set me up. He never made it to the bottom step. Two of the men from the SUVs moved with a speed that blurred in the light. One of them caught Cal's arm, twisting it behind his back with a sickening pop. The other kicked his legs out from under him. Cal hit the snow face first. Lynn shrieked again and tried to run back inside, but a female officer was already at the door, blocking her path. Ma'am, you need to step away from the residence, the officer said. You have 5 minutes to collect essential medications and leave. Everything else is now under asset freeze. Mason stood frozen, his phone dangling from his hand. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. Lila. Tell them this is a joke. I looked at my brother. I looked at the boy who had spent his life mocking me, who had just broadcast my humiliation to the world for clicks. I pulled the thermal blanket tighter around myself. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was the feeling of a heavy stone finally being rolled away from the entrance of a cave. I did not say a word to him. Evelyn walked back to me. She put her arm around my shoulders. It was a firm, solid weight. Come, Lila, she said. We have a lot of work to do, and you need a doctor. She guided me toward the open door of the limousine. The interior looked like a spaceship, warm amber lights, soft leather, a decanter of amber liquid. As I climbed in, I looked back one last time. Cal was being hauled to his feet by the security team. Handcuffs glinted on his wrists. He was shouting something about lawyers, about rights, about how he was the victim. Lynn was crying, clutching her purse, being escorted down the driveway toward the police cruisers. Mason was sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands, the ring light still shining on the empty doorway behind him. The house, the dark, looming monster that had eaten my childhood, was now swarming with strangers who were dismantling its secrets one by one. Evelyn climbed in beside me. The door thudded shut, sealing out the wind, the cold, and the shouting. The silence inside was instant and total. She looked at me, her face softening just a fraction. You are safe now, she said. I looked at my hands. They were starting to tingle as the blood rushed back. "Who are you?" I asked. Really?" Evelyn smiled. It was a small, dry smile. "I am the person who just revoked their permission to hurt you." She said, "Now, drink this. It is tea." The car began to move, turning around in the wide driveway, leaving the flashing lights and the ruin of my father's life in the rearview mirror. We were not heading back to the highway. We were heading deeper into the dark, toward a world I did not know existed, a world that apparently belonged to me. The heated leather seat of the limousine should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like a different kind of shock. My body was thawing, but my mind was freezing over. The shaking had moved from my bones to my teeth, a rhythmic clatter I could not stop. I stared out the tinted window as the Minnesota landscape blurred from white chaos into the orderly, dark silence of the highway. We crossed the state line into Wisconsin without a word spoken. Evelyn did not try to hug me again. She sat on the opposite bench, reading documents on a tablet with a detached intensity. She gave me space to fall apart, which was the kindest thing she could have done. We arrived at Lake Briar 2 hours later. I expected a mansion. I expected the kind of gaudy, columned monstrosity Cal would have built if he had the money. But Evelyn's estate was different. It was invisible from the road. We drove through a gate that looked like it was woven from iron vines, and then wound through a dense forest of pine and birch. The house emerged from the trees like a natural formation. It was made of dark stone and glass, low to the ground, hugging the earth rather than trying to dominate it. It was a fortress disguised as a home. The car stopped. The silence here was heavy. It was not the empty, lonely silence of Frostwood. This was the silence of power. Inside, the house was warm, smelling of cedar and old paper. A woman in a sharp black suit took my ruined coat. She did not look at my wet sock. She handed me a pair of thick wool slippers and vanished. "Come to the study," Evelyn said. "We will not sleep yet. The adrenaline will not let you. And we have lost too much time already." I followed her. The study was a cavern of books and dark wood, lit by a fireplace big enough to roast a whole deer. I sat in a leather chair that swallowed me. Evelyn poured 2 glasses of brandy. She placed one in front of me. "Drink," she commanded. "It is medicinal." I took a sip. It burned, grounding me. Why, I asked. My voice was raspy. "Why did you leave me there if you were alive? Why did you leave me with him?" Evelyn sat opposite me. Her face hardened. "I did not leave you, Lila. I was erased." She opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a stack of bundles tied with twine. She tossed them onto the coffee table between us. They landed with a heavy thud. I picked up the top one. It was a letter. Addressed to me, the postmark was from 12 years ago. Then another. From 10 years ago. Another from last year. Across the front of every single envelope, a red stamp shouted, "Return to sender, addressee unknown." "I wrote to you every month," Evelyn said. "For 20 years. Cal returned every single one. He filed restraining orders in 3 different counties. He moved you 4 times when you were a child. Did he not?" I nodded slowly. I remembered the sudden moves, the frantic packing, Cal telling me we had to leave because the neighborhoods were getting bad. "He moved you every time my lawyers found you," Evelyn continued. "He threatened to sue me for harassment. He claimed I was mentally unstable, a danger to you. He built a wall of paper and lies around you that I could not breach without risking him disappearing with you entirely. But you are powerful," I said, looking around the room. "You could have fought him. I could have—" She agreed. "But Cal had a hostage. You? And he had something else. He had the money." She reached for a sleek black file folder on the desk. This was the part where the fairy tale turned into a horror story. She slid the folder across the polished wood. "Open it." I opened the folder. It was a financial statement for something called the Wexford Heritage Fund. The numbers were staggering. The initial deposit, dated on my 18th birthday, was $14 million. "This was yours," Evelyn said. "It was a trust I set up the day you were born. It was meant to unlock when you became a legal adult. It was for your education, your first home, your freedom. I scanned the columns. Withdrawals, massive ones. 500,000 for property development, 200,000 for consulting fees, 50,000 for automotive assets. The balance at the bottom of the last page was zero. I felt sick. The roast beef dinner I never ate seemed to churn in my stomach. Look at the authorization, Evelyn said. I turned the page. There, at the bottom of a withdrawal request for $1 million, was a signature. Received by Lila Hudson. I stared at the ink. It was my name, but it was not my hand. The L was looped in a high, aggressive arc. The H was slashed across with a heavy bar. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on my report cards. I had seen it on permission slips. I had seen it on the checks Cal wrote to buy his scotch. It was Cal's handwriting, trying to look like mine. He forged my signature. I whispered, "He became your legal guardian for the fund because I was legally dead." Evelyn said, "And then he signed your name for a decade. He drained $14 million to build that house, to buy his cars, to fund that woman's lifestyle, and to spoil that boy. He did not just lock you out of the house, Lila. He locked you out of your own life. He used your money to build the cage he kept you in." I closed the folder. My hands were trembling again, but not from cold. It was rage, a hot, liquid rage that felt entirely new. "And you," I asked, looking up at her, "you let him think you were dead?" Why, Evelyn stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the black trees. "Because the rot was not just Cal, it was inside my own company. When your mother died, I was grief-stricken. I was weak. People smell weakness like sharks smell blood. I started noticing discrepancies in the firm's accounts. Someone was selling us out. I was being blackmailed. They threatened to hurt you if I did not step down." She turned back to me, her silhouette sharp against the firelight. "So I crashed a plane. It cost me a fortune to arrange. But it bought me silence. I went underground. I became a ghost so I could watch them. I needed to see who would mourn me and who would run for the safe. Cal ran for the safe before the wreckage even cooled." She walked back to the chair and sat down, leaning forward, her eyes bored into mine. "I have spent the last 15 years building a dossier on everyone who betrayed this family. Cal is just the beginning. But to get him, to really get him, I need you. I need the victim to become the witness. I am not a victim," I said. The words came out automatically. A reflex. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Tonight, you were. Tomorrow, you choose. But before you choose, you need to know the last thing." She hesitated. For a woman made of steel, she looked momentarily fragile. "You asked about your mother." I froze. "My mother. Marin. The story was always the same. She went for a walk on an icy road. A truck lost control. It was tragic. It was quick. Cal told me that story every year on the anniversary." "Cal told you it was an accident," Evelyn said softly. "A slip, a slide, a tragedy of weather." "Yes." Evelyn shook her head. Her face was grim. "My daughter did not slip. She was an athlete. She knew how to walk on ice." "And the autopsy report Cal showed you, the one that said blunt force trauma from vehicle impact." I nodded. "It was a redacted version. I have the original." The room felt very small suddenly. Marin did not die on the road. Lila. She died in the hospital, 4 hours after she was admitted, and the injuries were not consistent with a truck hitting a pedestrian. They were consistent with a fall, a push, a violent altercation that ended with her head striking the pavement of a driveway. My breath hitched. A push? The police report disappeared. Evelyn said, "The responding officer retired a month later with a very generous pension. The hospital records were sealed by a court order that Cal filed the next morning." I stood up. I could not sit anymore. I paced the room, the soft wool slippers moving silently on the expensive rug. "Are you saying he killed her?" I asked. "I am saying he is responsible," Evelyn replied. "Whether he pushed her with his hands or chased her until she fell. I do not know yet, but I know she was leaving him. She had called me that morning. She was packing a bag. She was taking you." A beep cut through the air. It came from the desk, a A sleek tablet screen lit up with a red alert banner. A young man entered the room. He was not the driver. He was younger, wearing a hoodie and glasses, holding a laptop. "Ms. Wexford," he said, his voice urgent. "We have a ping." "Report?" Evelyn said, snapping back into general mode. "Someone is trying to access the archived patient database at St. Elowyn Medical Center," the young man said. "Specifically, the closed files from 1998. "Who is it?" I asked. The young man looked at me, then at Evelyn. "The IP traces back to a burner phone, but the geolocation is the sheriff's station in Frostwood." Evelyn looked at me. "Cal is not wasting time," she said. "He knows I am back. He knows you are with me. And he knows exactly what we are going to look for. He is trying to purge the records before we can get to them." She stood up, grabbing her cane. "You wanted to know the truth. Lila. This is the price of it. The moment you start digging, the monsters start digging too. He will destroy everything to keep that file buried. He will slander you. He will lie about you. He will try to break you." I looked at the file on the table. The $14 million, the forged signature, the letters I never got. I thought of my mother, packing a bag to save me, only to end up dead on a driveway. I thought of the cold wind on the porch. "Let him try," I said. Evelyn smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Good answer. Go to sleep. Lila. Tomorrow, we go to the hospital." The morning after the extraction did not bring peace. It brought a different kind of storm, one made of paper, legal threats, and digital filth. I woke up in a room that smelled of lavender and expensive linen, but the moment I turned on my phone, the world crashed back in. My notifications were a solid wall of noise. Missed calls from unknown numbers, text messages from cousins I had not spoken to in a decade, and a barrage of alerts from social media platforms I barely used. I went downstairs to the kitchen, seeking coffee and answers. The house was quiet in that heavy, insulated way that suggests serious people are doing serious work behind closed doors. Evelyn was already awake, sitting at the head of a long marble island, dressed in a silk blouse that looked like armor. She was watching a tablet screen with a look of mild distaste, as if she were inspecting a piece of rotten fruit. "Do not look at your phone, Lila," she said without looking up. "It is a little late for that," I replied, pouring coffee. My hands were steady today. The shock had metabolized into a cold, hard focus. "What is happening? Cal is playing the victim card," she said. "He moved faster than I anticipated. He went to the sheriff in Frostwood at 7 this morning. He filed a report claiming I kidnapped you. He claims I am a mentally unstable relative who brainwashed his vulnerable daughter and abducted her in the middle of a mental health crisis." I almost laughed. A mental health crisis, I was the only one sane enough to wear a coat. "It gets better," Evelyn said, sliding the tablet toward me. "It was a video. Mason. Of course it was Mason. He had posted it 3 hours ago. The title was horrifying. My sister was taken by a cult leader. Help us find Lila." I pressed play. The video was a masterclass in manipulation. It started with a shaky, black and white filter. It showed me standing on the porch the night before, screaming, but the audio had been doctored. They had removed Cal's voice entirely. They had removed the sound of the wind. It was just me, looking disheveled and wild, shouting at a silent house. Then it cut to Mason, sitting in his bedroom, looking teary-eyed. "Guys," he whispered, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "We are so scared. Lila has been struggling for years. We tried to keep her safe. We tried to keep her inside where it was warm, but she just snapped. She ran out into the blizzard, and then this black car pulled up. These people took her. We think it is her grandmother, but she is supposed to be dead. It is sick. Please, if you see her, call the police. She is not well." I stared at the screen. The comments were scrolling by so fast they blurred. "Praying for you, Mason. That looks terrifying. She looks totally psycho in that clip. Hope she gets the help she needs." I felt the blood drain from my face. They were rewriting reality. They were turning my escape into an abduction and my trauma into insanity. "I have to reply," I said, reaching for the tablet. "I have to tell them the truth." I have to post the video of Cal throwing my boots. Evelyn's hand clamped down on my wrist. Her grip was iron. No, but they are lying. Of course they are lying, Evelyn snapped. That is what cornered rats do. But if you engage with him now, you validate him. You turn this into a domestic dispute, a he said, she said drama for the internet to consume. You are not an influencer. Lila, you are an heiress and a plaintiff. We do not argue in the comments section. We argue in court. Before I could argue, the intercom on the wall buzzed. Ms. Wexford. The security chief's voice crackled. We have law enforcement at the main gate, local deputies from the county. They have a warrant to check on the welfare of Lila Hudson. Evelyn stood up, smoothing her slacks. Let them in, she said. We walked to the front foyer. The heavy oak doors opened to reveal 2 deputies. They looked uncomfortable. They were out of their jurisdiction, standing on the doorstep of a woman who likely paid more in taxes than their entire department's budget. Behind them, I saw a sleek black car, not police. It was a sedan with tinted windows, parked just outside the gate. Ms. Wexford, the older deputy asked, we received a report regarding a kidnapping. We need to speak with Lila Hudson. I am right here, I said, stepping forward. The deputy looked at me. He looked at my dry clothes, my combed hair, and the cup of coffee in my hand. He looked for bruises, for ropes, for signs of distress. He found none. Ma'am, are you here of your own free will? Yes, I said. I left my father's house because he locked me outside in a sub-zero storm. My grandmother came to get me. I am safe. The deputy shifted his weight. Your father claims you are suffering from a psychotic break and that you are a danger to yourself. I am a senior compliance officer for a major holdings firm in Chicago. I said, my voice cool and professional. I have no history of mental instability. I have a law degree. And I'm 32 years old. I am telling you that I am fine. If my father continues to waste police resources, my lawyer will be filing a harassment suit. The deputy nodded. He seemed relieved. He clearly did not want to be part of this rich people drama. All right, ma'am. We just had to check. We will let Mr. Hartman know you are safe. As they turned to leave, Evelyn spoke up. Her voice was like a whip crack. Deputy, he turned back. Yes, ma'am, tell Mr. Hartman that if he or any member of his family steps 1 foot onto this property, or if that gray sedan parked outside my gate does not vacate the premises in 5 minutes, I will consider it a threat to my life, and I will have my security team respond with authorized force. Do I make myself clear? The deputy looked at the gate, then back at Evelyn. He tipped his hat, crystal clear. Ma'am. When the door closed, I slumped against the wall. They are watching us. Evelyn walked to the window. That gray sedan is from Shadow Ridge Investigations, a private detective firm. Cal is spending money he does not have to dig up dirt on us. He is desperate. Lila, he knows the audit is coming. She turned to her assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, who had appeared silently in the hallway. Sarah, show her the financials. The second layer. Sarah handed me a thick binder. I followed them back into the study. I sat down, expecting to see more of Cal's theft, but what I saw was worse. We traced the smaller withdrawals. Sarah said, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, grocery stores, boutiques, a nail salon in Minneapolis. I looked at the authorization signatures. They were not the jagged, aggressive forgeries of my father. They were softer, loopier. Lynn, I whispered. Your stepmother. Evelyn confirmed. Cal stole the big chunks for his investments and his debts. But Lynn, she was the parasite. She used your trust fund as her personal debit card for 10 years. She paid for Mason's camera equipment. She paid for her own dental veneers. She paid for the catering at the Christmas parties where she treated you like a guest. I stared at the pages. I remembered Lynn's fake smiles. I remembered her telling me, oh well, honey, we are just barely scraping by this month, so we cannot get you a big gift. She had been wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that I now realized I had paid for. They did not just hate me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They needed me. Evelyn nodded. They needed you to be the failure. They needed you to be the broken, incompetent daughter who could not be trusted with money. Because if you were strong, if you were capable, you might have asked to see the accounts. You might have asked why a $14 million trust was empty. They spent your entire life gaslighting you into believing you were worthless so they could rob you blind. I closed the binder. The anger I felt now was not hot. It was cold. It was absolute. I do not want to just sue them. I said, I want to destroy them. Evelyn sat down opposite me. Revenge is a messy business. Lila, if you want to destroy them, you have to be willing to get dirty. They will throw mud. They will lie. That video Mason posted, that is just the opening salvo. By tomorrow, they will have anonymous sources claiming you were a drug addict in college. They will claim you assaulted Lynn. They will say anything to discredit you before we get to court. Let them talk. I said, I am done listening. Evelyn studied my face. She seemed to be measuring my resolve. There is one more thing, she said. The private investigator outside. He is not just looking for dirt on you. He is looking for something specific. We intercepted a call from Cal to the agency this morning. What is he looking for? The medical records, Evelyn said. The original file from the night your mother died. I went cold. Cal knows I have copies, Evelyn continued. But copies can be challenged in court. He knows the original physical file, the one with the doctor's handwritten notes, the nursing logs. The raw x-rays is still archived in the basement of St. Elowyn Medical Center. He paid a clerk to seal it years ago, but he is terrified we will get a court order to unseal it. He is trying to destroy it. I realized. He is trying to get to it before we do, Evelyn corrected. Or he is trying to alter it. I stood up. I walked to the fireplace and looked at the flames. I thought about my mother. I thought about the lie I had lived with for 20 years. The accident. The ice. I do not want money, I said quietly. I will take the money back because it is mine. But that is not enough. I want the truth. I want the truth about how she died. And I want it to be a truth that stands up in a courtroom. I want him in handcuffs. Evelyn, not for fraud, for murder. Evelyn stood up too. She walked over and stood beside me. She was tall, imposing, and for the first time, she looked like a partner, not just a savior. Then we have to go to the source, she said. We have to go to Milwaukee, to the hospital. But he is watching us. I said, if we leave, that PI will follow. Evelyn smiled. It was a smile that promised violence. Let him follow. I have been playing hide-and-seek with the world for 15 years. Lila, I know how to lose a tail. She turned to Sarah. Prepare the decoy car, and get Jonah Reed on the phone. Tell him we are going to St. Elowyn, and tell him to bring the bolt cutters. Jonah Reed. I asked. My head of security, Evelyn said, and a former homicide detective. If Cal wants a war, Lila, we are going to bring him a war. Go change your clothes. Put on something you can run in. We are leaving in 20 minutes. I went upstairs. I took off the silk blouse Evelyn had lent me. I put on a pair of dark tactical pants and a black turtleneck I found in the closet. I pulled on a pair of heavy boots. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the compliance officer who checked boxes. She was not the daughter who apologized for existing. She was the daughter of Marin Wexford, and she was going hunting. I walked back downstairs. Evelyn was waiting. She handed me a pair of sunglasses. Ready, she asked. I put the glasses on. Drive, I said. St. Elowyn Medical Center in Milwaukee was not a place of healing. To me, standing in its shadow under the gray, bruised sky of late December, it looked like a vault. The building was a brutalist block of concrete and dirty glass, stained by decades of city exhaust and winter sludge. Jonah Reed parked the nondescript sedan 3 blocks away. Evelyn had chosen him well. Jonah was a former civil investigator with the build of a linebacker and the silence of a monk. He had not spoken a word since we left the estate, other than to confirm we were clear of any tales. He wore a tan coat that looked innocent enough, but I noticed the way his eyes constantly swept the perimeter, dissecting every passerby for threats. We are going in through the loading dock, Jonah said. His voice was gravel, low and steady. The main entrance has cameras linked to the facial recognition grid. If your father has flagged you, the security desk will light up the second you walk in. I nodded. I felt a strange numbness spreading through my chest. It was not the cold this time. It was the proximity to the place where my mother had taken her last breath. For 20 years, I had avoided hospitals. The smell of antiseptic always made me nauseous. We slipped past a distracted delivery driver and navigated a maze of service corridors. The air here was stale, smelling of laundry detergent and boiled cafeteria food. We took a freight elevator down to the sub-basement, the records department. When the doors slid open, the air changed. It was cooler here, dry and smelling of old paper and dust. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. Rows of metal shelving stretched out into the gloom, stacked high with cardboard boxes. At the end of the aisle, behind a glass partition, an elderly woman sat at a metal desk. She was surrounded by towers of files. She looked like she had been part of the basement's architecture since the foundation was poured. She wore a cardigan the color of oatmeal and reading glasses on a chain. Jonah stayed back, leaning against a pillar, watching the elevator. I walked forward alone. The woman looked up. She adjusted her glasses, squinting. Then, she froze. Her hand went to her mouth. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. "Marin," she whispered. The name hit me like a physical slap. I stopped walking. "No," I said softly. "I am Lila Hudson. Marin was my mother." The woman walked around the desk. She came close to me. Ignoring the glass barrier, she studied my face with a terrifying intensity. Her eyes were watery and blue, filled with a sudden, overwhelming sadness. "My God," she said, "you look just like her. It hurts to look at you. It really does. You have her eyes, the same sad eyes." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You knew her. I was the night shift intake clerk for 20 years. She said, "I processed her admission. I processed her death certificate. I remember everyone, dear, but I especially remember the ones who should not have died." I gripped the edge of the counter. My knuckles were white. "I need her file." I said, "I need to know what happened that night. My father, he told me it was an accident, but I do not believe him anymore." The woman looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked over my shoulder at Jonah, who gave her a solemn nod. She sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 tragedies she had filed away in this basement. "What is your father's name?" she asked, though I suspected she already knew. "Cal Hartman." She turned back to her computer. It was an old machine, the screen flickering green. Her fingers typed slowly. "Hartman, Marin, date of death, December 24th, 1998. She hit enter. A harsh electronic buzzer sounded from the computer. The screen flashed bright red. I leaned forward. Large, block letters pulsed on the monitor. "File sealed. Court order number 4920. Access denied." The woman sat back, shaking her head. "I cannot open it," she said. "It is locked from the top. High-level judicial seal." I looked at the bottom of the screen. There was a field labeled Requester, Calvin Hartman. I felt the air leave the room. He had not just lied to me. He had legally buried the truth. He had gone to a judge, paid a lawyer, and ensured that no one, not even his daughter, could ever see the medical reality of her mother's death. "It is gone," I whispered. The woman looked at the red screen. Then she looked at the security camera in the corner of the room. She reached into her drawer. She did not pull out a file. She pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy. The toner was fading, the edges soft and gray. They came for the physical file 2 days after the funeral. She said quietly, "Your father's lawyers. They took everything, the x-rays, the nurse's notes, the intake forms. They said it was for private storage, but I knew what that meant. It meant the shredder." She slid the folded paper across the metal desk. Her hand was trembling slightly, but the night she died I made a copy of the intake summary. Just the first page. I do not know why. Maybe because she was so young. Maybe because she kept asking for her baby. I stared at the paper. I was afraid to touch it. She was asking for me. She was asking for Lila. The woman said, over and over. Even when she could not speak anymore, she was mouthing the name. I reached out and took the paper. I unfolded it. The header read, St. Elwyn Emergency Admittance. Patient Doe. Jane later identified Wexford. Marin. I skipped the vitals. I skipped the blood pressure and the heart rate. My eyes went straight to the section labeled Physician's Initial Assessment. The handwriting was scribbled, frantic, but I could read the medical shorthand. Multiple contusions to thoracic cage. Linear fracture of the left parietal bone. Defensive wounds present on forearms and palms. Trauma consistent with impact against a stationary vertical surface. Note: pattern of bruising on upper arms suggests forcible restraint. And then, typed clearly at the bottom, injuries inconsistent with reported traffic accident. Suspicion of domestic violence, assault, police notified. I read it again. Defensive wounds, forcible restraint. My mother did not slip on the ice. She fought. She put her hands up. She tried to stop him. A memory flashed in my mind. Vivid and terrible. I was 7 years old. It was July. A sweltering, humid Minnesota summer. Marin was wearing a long-sleeved turtleneck. I asked her why. She smiled. A tight, pained smile, and told me she was feeling a chill. I remembered hugging her and feeling her wince. Oh, be careful, Lila. She had said, Mommy tripped in the garden. I am a little sore. She was always tripping. She was always walking into doors. She was always clumsy. I closed my eyes, the paper crumping in my fist. It was not clumsiness. It was Cal. Every long sleeve was a cover-up. Every excuse was a lie. He had been hurting her for years, and I had been too young, too blind to see it. I looked back at the paper. There was something else. At the very bottom, in the section for administrative authorization, there was a signature. Power of attorney presented by spouse at 0200 hours. All medical decisions transferred to Calvin Hartman. I looked at Jonah. He had moved closer, reading over my shoulder. 2 a.m, Jonah said. His voice was cold. She was still alive. I looked at the archivist. He brought legal papers to the hospital. While she was dying, the woman nodded. He did not come alone. He came with a lawyer. Your mother was in a coma, on a ventilator. The doctors wanted to perform a craniectomy to relieve the pressure on her brain. It might have saved her, but your father presented a document giving him full control over her care. She lowered her voice to a whisper. He refused the surgery. He said she would not want to live as a vegetable. He signed the do not resuscitate order at 3 a.m. She died at 4. I felt like I was going to vomit. He did not just kill her. He watched her die. He legally prevented the doctors from saving her. He stood there, in a suit, holding a piece of paper, and let the woman he married suffocate because she knew too much. This is murder, I said. My voice sounded hollow. It is hard to prove, Jonah said gently. He had the legal right to make that call. That is why he brought the lawyer. He covered his tracks in real time. I looked at the archivist. Is there anyone left? Anyone who was there? The doctor who signed this note. Dr. Aris passed away 5 years ago. She said, the nurses have all moved on or retired. Then we have nothing. I said, just a photocopy and a dead end. The woman hesitated. She looked at the door again, checking for shadows. There was one other person. She said, who? There was a security guard, a young man. He was stationed outside the trauma room that night because of the domestic violence flag. He saw your father. He saw the lawyer. He heard the argument in the hallway when the doctor tried to fight for the surgery. Where is he? Jonah asked, pulling out a small notebook. His name is Darren Klein. She said, he quit a week after the incident. He was shaken up. He said he could not work in a place that let bad men win. She paused, her fingers twisting a paperclip on her desk. He tried to find you, Lila. About 10 years ago, he called the archives looking for contact information for Marin's daughter. He said he had something he needed to tell you, something that had been eating him alive. I leaned in. Did you give him my number? I could not. she said. I did not have it, and the file was already sealed. But I wrote down his contact info, just in case. I kept it in my address book all these years. I do not know why. I just felt like the story was not over. She opened a drawer and pulled out a worn, leather-bound address book. She flipped to the letter K. Here, Darren Klein. He moved out of the city. He is living in a place called Stone Creek. It is a tiny town, right on the border of Iowa. Jonah wrote the address down. Stone Creek. That is 4 hours west. The woman reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was like dry parchment. He knows something. Lila. He was the only one in that hallway who was not on your father's payroll. Find him. I folded the photocopy and put it in my pocket. I looked at this woman, this stranger who had kept a candle burning for my mother in a dark basement for 20 years. Thank you, I said. She smiled sadly. Go get him, honey, for her. We walked back to the elevator. The ride up was silent. The weight of what I had learned was crushing me. My father was not just a bully. He was a monster who used the law as a weapon. He had stood over my dying mother and signed her death warrant. We walked out to the loading dock. The air was even colder now. Snow was starting to fall again. Light flurries that danced in the gray light. Jonah unlocked the car. We are going to Iowa, he asked. I got in the passenger seat. I stared at the dashboard. I felt a fire lighting in my belly, burning through the grief. We are going to find Darren Klein, I said, and we are going to make him talk. Jonah started the engine. There is a storm coming, he said, looking at the sky. A bad one. Let it come, I said. As we pulled out of the alley, I looked back at the hospital one last time. It held the secret of her death, but it no longer held the power of silence. I had a name. I had a direction. And for the first time in my life, I was not running away from the scary things. I was driving straight toward them, driving west, toward Stone Creek, and toward the man who had heard my father's true voice in the hallway of the dead. The drive west was a journey into a void. The further we moved away from Milwaukee, the more the world dissolved into a seamless, terrifying white. The highway was a ribbon of black ice cutting through cornfields that had been swallowed by the blizzard. The heater in the sedan hummed, fighting a losing battle against the Iowa border chill. But I was cold from the inside out. Jonah drove with both hands on the wheel, his eyes scanning the mirrors every 30 seconds. He was professional, rhythmic, and tense. The radio had given up on music an hour ago, dissolving into static that sounded like the universe hissing at us. I stared out the window, but there was nothing to see, just the endless, hypnotic swirl of snow. It felt like we were driving off the edge of the map. It felt like the past was not just behind us, but racing up the shoulder, trying to run us off the road. I kept touching the pocket of my tactical pants. The photocopy from the hospital burned against my thigh. Defensive wounds. The words were branded onto my brain. We are almost there, Jonah said. His voice was the only solid thing in the car. Stone Creek is just past this ridge. Stone Creek was barely a town. It was a collection of siding and shingles huddled together against the wind, anchored by a gas station and a church. We navigated the empty streets until we found the address from the archivist's book. It was a small bungalow at the end of a dead-end street. The windows were dark. The driveway was unshoveled. It looked like a place where someone lived when they did not want to be found. Jonah parked the car facing out, ready for a quick exit. He unbuckled his seatbelt and looked at me. Let me go to the door first, he said. Stay here until I signal. He walked up the path, stepping high over the drifts. I watched him knock. He waited. He knocked again. I saw the curtain twitch. A face appeared, pale and suspicious. Jonah held up his hands, palms open. He spoke through the glass. I saw the door open a crack, the safety chain still engaged. Jonah pointed back at the car. The face in the crack turned. Even from 20 yards away, through the falling snow, I felt the impact of his gaze. The door slammed shut. I thought he was refusing. I reached for the door handle, panic rising, but then the sound of a chain sliding free echoed in the cold air. The door opened wide. Jonah waved me over. I stepped out of the car. The wind hit me instantly. slapping my cheeks red. I walked up the path, my boots crunching on the frozen crust. The man standing in the doorway was in his 50s, but he looked older. He wore a flannel shirt over a thermal, and his face was gray, the color of wet ash. He had the eyes of someone who had not slept well in 2 decades. He watched me approach. As I got closer, stepping into the yellow light of his porch, his knees seemed to give way. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. "Marin," he whispered. It was the second time in 24 hours someone had mistaken me for the dead. It did not feel like a compliment. It felt like a haunting. "I am Lila," I said, stopping at the bottom of the steps, "Marin's daughter." He stared at me. His mouth worked silently. Then he stepped back, opening the door fully. "Come in," he said. His voice was rough, unused. "You better come in." The house smelled of stale coffee and sawdust. It was sparse, almost monastic. No photos on the walls, just furniture that looked like it had been bought secondhand and used gently. We sat at a small kitchen table. Darren Klein poured 3 mugs of black coffee. His hands shook so badly the liquid slopped over the rim onto the formica. "I knew you would come," he said. He did not look at me. He looked at the steam rising from his cup. "I told myself for years you would come. I practiced what I would say." He looked up then, and the misery in his eyes was bottomless. "But now that you are here, I do not have the words. You saw them that night." I said. I did not want to ease into it. I wanted the poison out. "You were the guard outside the trauma room." Darren nodded. "I was 22, just a kid. I needed the job." "Tell me what happened," I said. "Not the medical part. I know the medical part. I want to know what you saw before the doctors got there." Darren took a deep breath. He ran a hand over his thinning hair. "It was not just the trauma room. Lila, I was on patrol in the parking structure earlier that night. It was Christmas Eve. The lot was empty. I was doing a sweep of the lower level." He paused. "I saw a car, a big, expensive sedan, and I saw a man and a woman. They were outside the car. They were arguing, screaming at each other. The acoustics in that concrete box made it sound like gunshots." "Was it Cal?" I asked. My hands were gripping the warm mug. "It was your father," Darren said. "And your mother." She was crying. She had a bag over her shoulder. She was trying to walk away from him. She kept saying she was leaving. She said she was taking the baby and going to her mother's. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "Evelyn." She was coming to Evelyn. "What did Cal do?" Jonah asked. Darren closed his eyes. He grabbed her. He tried to pull the bag away. She fought him. She was strong. "Your mom." She shoved him back, and then he swallowed hard. He did not slip. "Lila." And neither did she. I saw him look around to see if anyone was watching. He did not see me. I was in the stairwell shadow. He looked right at her, and he shoved her, hard, with both hands. He shoved her right backward. I stopped breathing. There was a concrete pillar. Darren whispered, "She hit it. She hit it so hard the sound it was like a melon cracking. She went down and she did not get up." The kitchen was silent. The only sound was the wind rattling the loose window pane above the sink. He stood over her. Darren continued. He stood there for a full minute. He just looked at her. Then he nudged her with his foot. When she groaned, he looked annoyed, not scared, annoyed. He picked her up not gently and threw her into the back seat. I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled through me. I called it in. Darren said, "I radioed dispatch that there was an assault in the garage, but by the time I got down there, he had driven her to the emergency entrance. He was already playing the grieving husband. Help me, help me. She slipped on the ice. Why didn't you tell the police?" I asked. "Why didn't you stop him?" I tried. Darren slammed his hand on the table. The coffee cups jumped. I told the responding officer. I told the detective. I wrote a statement. I sat in that precinct for 3 hours. And then what? And then the chief of police walked in. He walked in with your father. Your father put a hand on my shoulder. He smiled at me. And the chief told me that I must have been mistaken. He told me that it was dark, and that the lighting in the garage was tricky. He told me that if I persisted with this false report, I would be charged with filing a false claim and I would lose my job. He said a boy like me didn't want to make enemies with the biggest donor in the city. Darren looked at his hands. I was 22. Lila. I was scared. I had a pregnant girlfriend. I let them shred my statement. He stood up and walked to a cupboard. He reached into the back, behind a stack of canned soup, and pulled out a small, metal box. But I did not give them everything, he said. He opened the box. Inside was a small, black device, a dictaphone, the kind doctors used to record notes in the 90s. Later that night, outside the trauma room, the doctor came out to talk to your father. Dr. Aris. He was a good man. He was fighting for her. I was standing guard at the door. I had my recorder on. We used them for incident reports, but I just left it running in my pocket. He placed the device on the table. It looked archaic, a relic of a dead world. This is a copy, he said. I transferred it to digital years ago. But this is the original tape. Play it, I said. Darren pressed the button. The wheels turned with a mechanical whir. There was a hiss of static. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was younger, smoother, but unmistakably him. I'm telling you. Doctor, you are not opening her skull. That was Cal. The voice was calm, chillingly calm. Mr. Hartman, please. A second voice pleaded. Dr. Aris. He sounded frantic. The swelling is critical. If we do not operate in the next hour, the brain stem will be compromised. She will die. She is in pain. Cal's voice said, I do not want her to suffer. I want you to make her comfortable. We can save her, Dr. Aris shouted. This is not a terminal case. This is a treatable trauma. Why are you blocking this? There was a pause on the tape, a long, heavy silence. Then Cal spoke again. His voice dropped an octave. It sounded like ice cracking. Doctor, I am a significant donor to this hospital. I am also the sole power of attorney for my wife. I am telling you that her quality of life would be unacceptable to me. I need this file to reflect a tragic accident. I need the cause of death to be natural complications from a fall. Do you understand me? Or do I need to call the board of directors and have your license revoked for malpractice on that difficult birth last month? I gasped. He was blackmailing the doctor. He was trading my mother's life for the doctor's career. You are killing her. Doctor, Aris whispered on the tape. She is already dead. Cal replied. Just let the machine stop. Then, a rustling sound, and a faint, weak noise in the background. A woman's voice. Slurred, barely a breath. Lila. I covered my mouth. Don't let him take Lila. The tape clicked off. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. I stared at the black plastic box. That was my mother. Her last words. She wasn't thinking about the pain. She wasn't thinking about God. She was thinking about me. She was trying to protect me from the monster standing over her bed, and he had won. He had taken me. He had raised me. He had fed me and clothed me and locked me out in the snow. All while knowing he had murdered the only person who ever loved me. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot, burning a trail through the cold numbness of my face. He is a monster. I whispered, my entire life, every birthday, every Christmas. He looked at me, and he knew. Darren pushed the recorder toward me. It is yours, he said. I have been keeping it safe for you. I moved 5 times. I changed my name twice. I knew one day you would come looking for the answer. I reached out and took the recorder. It felt heavy, like it contained the weight of a human soul. Thank you, I said. My voice broke. Thank you for keeping her voice. Jonah stood up. He was looking at the window, his body rigid. We need to go, he said sharply. Why, I asked, wiping my eyes. Because this house is too exposed, Jonah said. And we have been here too long. He reached for his coat, but he was too late. Crash! The kitchen window exploded. It wasn't a bullet. It was a rock, the size of a grapefruit, hurled with tremendous force. Shards of glass sprayed across the room like diamond shrapnel. I screamed and threw my hands up to cover my face. Darren yelled and ducked. The rock skidded across the linoleum floor and hit the leg of the table. Jonah was moving before the glass settled. He grabbed me by the collar of my tactical shirt and yanked me down to the floor. "Stay down!" he roared. Cold air rushed into the room, carrying the howl of the wind. The safety of the small kitchen was gone, shattered in an instant. I looked at the rock. It was wrapped in a piece of yellow legal paper, held in place by a rubber band. I crawled toward it, ignoring the glass cutting into my palms. "Don't touch it!" Jonah yelled, drawing a weapon from his shoulder holster. I ignored him. I pulled the paper free. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. There were 3 words, written in thick, black marker. "Stop digging." I looked up at the shattered window. The curtains were blowing wildly in the gale. Outside, there was nothing but the white dark of the storm. No car, no person, just the feeling of eyes watching from the void. Darren was huddled in the corner, clutching his chest. His face was white. "He found me," Darren whispered. His voice was a rasp of pure terror. "He found me." Jonah grabbed my arm and hauled me up. "We are leaving. Now. Out the back." He grabbed the dictaphone from the table and shoved it into his pocket. He grabbed Darren by the arm. "You too, old man. You cannot stay here." "But my house." Darren stammered. "Your house is a target." Jonah snapped. "Move." We ran through the small living room, through the back door, and into the biting cold of the yard. We scrambled over a chain-link fence, falling into the deep snow of the alleyway. As we ran toward where Jonah had parked the car, I looked back at the house. A figure was standing under the streetlight at the end of the block. He was wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low. He was not running. He was just watching. He raised a phone to his ear. I scrambled into the back seat of the sedan, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Jonah threw the car into gear, tires spinning on the ice before catching traction. We fishtailed out of the alley and roared onto the main road. I looked down at my hand. I was still clutching the yellow paper. They knew where we were. They knew exactly who we were talking to. The road trip was not a hunt anymore. It was a chase, and the thing chasing us had just thrown a rock through a window to let us know that next time, it would not be a stone. "Drive," I said to Jonah. "Just drive." The drive back to Wisconsin was not a flight. It was a tactical withdrawal. We arrived at the estate just as the sun was bleeding a pale, sickly light over the horizon. The moment the tires touched the gravel of Evelyn's driveway, the dynamic shifted. We were no longer running. We were fortifying. Evelyn met us at the door. She did not ask if I was okay. She looked at Jonah and held out her hand. "The tape," she said. Jonah handed her the plastic bag containing the dictaphone. Evelyn handled it like it was a radioactive isotope. She handed it immediately to a man I had not met before, a severe-looking individual in a gray suit who introduced himself as a forensic audio specialist. "Establish the chain of custody immediately." Evelyn ordered, "I want that audio cleaned, digitized, and authenticated by 3 independent labs by noon tomorrow. If there is a single hiss on that tape that can be challenged by a defense attorney, I want to know about it." She turned to me. Her eyes were hard, bright with the thrill of the hunt. "Go shower, Lila. Wash the motel smell off you. We are not done." I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash away the memory of the rock crashing through the window. When I came downstairs an hour later, the study had been transformed into a war room. The heavy oak table was covered in schematics, bank statements, and flowcharts. Sarah, Evelyn's assistant, was standing by a whiteboard. She held a red marker. "We found it," Sarah said without preamble. "Found what I asked. Sitting down. Where the money went." Sarah said, "It was not just spent on lifestyle. Cal is greedy, but he is not stupid enough to spend $14 million on suits and cars directly from a trust fund. He laundered it." She tapped a box on the whiteboard labeled Hartman Ridge Capital. "This is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, but operating out of a P.O. box in Delaware. Every time Cal withdrew money from your trust for property development or consulting, it went here." "And then where did it go?" I asked. Sarah drew a line to a second box. L&M Interiors, LLC. It is a boutique design firm registered in Milwaukee. Sarah said, "It has reported 0 employees and 0 profit for 10 years. but it has received over $6 million in payments from Hartman Ridge Capital. I frowned. L&M. Lynn and Mason. Sarah nodded. And here's the kicker. The registered agent for L&M Interiors is not Cal. It is Lynn Hartman. I stared at the name. Lynn, the woman who played the role of the ditzy, wine-drinking spectator, the woman who pretended she did not understand business. She is not just his wife. I realized. She is his bagman. She is the bookkeeper. Evelyn corrected, stepping out of the shadows. She signs the checks to keep Cal's name off the final layer of fraud. She makes the small transfers, the tuition payments for Mason, the jewelry, the cars. She cleans the money so Cal can keep his hands technically clean. My stomach twisted. She knew. All those years she smiled at me. All those years she told me I should be grateful for Cal's generosity. She was spending my mother's money. She was eating my inheritance. She is going to prison too. I said, it was not a question. If we do this right. Evelyn said, they are all going down. RICO statutes were made for families like this. Just then, a printer in the corner whirred to life. Jonah walked over and pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the tray. He read it, and a dry smile touched his lips. He is panicked, Jonah said. Who, Mason? Look. He handed me a tablet. It showed Mason's social media profile. The video, the one where he claimed I was kidnapped, was gone. In fact, his entire feed for the last 48 hours had been scrubbed. He deleted it. I said, he tried to? Jonah said, but the internet is written in ink, not pencil. We archived the original stream. We have the raw footage of him laughing while you were locked out. We have the comments he liked where people were mocking you, and, Jonah added, tapping the screen, we are not the only ones who saw it. A local news station in Minneapolis downloaded it before he pulled it. They are running a segment tonight on the mystery of the Frostwood heiress. Mason thinks deleting the evidence saves him. In reality, it just proves consciousness of guilt. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Wexford, the security chief said, a courier is at the gate. Legal service. Let him in. Evelyn said. 10 minutes later, a thick envelope lay on the table. It was heavy, cream-colored, and reeked of billable hours. Evelyn opened it with a silver letter opener. She scanned the first page, then tossed it onto the table with a laugh. Predictable, she said. I picked it up. It was a cease and desist order and a notice of intent to sue for defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and kidnapping to Ms. Lila Hudson and Ms. Evelyn Wexford. You are hereby ordered to return Ms. Hudson to the care of her legal guardian, Calvin Hartman, immediately. Furthermore, you are to cease the dissemination of false and malicious rumors regarding the events of December 24th. Failure to comply will result in a lawsuit seeking damages in excess of $10 million. He is suing us, I asked. Incredulous. He locks me out. He steals my money, and he sues me. He's trying to scare you, Evelyn said. He thinks you are still the little girl who is afraid of his shouting. He thinks a letterhead from a fancy law firm will make us back down. She looked at me. What do you want to do? Lila. I looked at the letter. I looked at the name Calvin Hartman signed at the bottom. It was the same signature that had authorized the Do Not Resuscitate order. It was the same signature that had emptied my trust fund. Let him sue, I said. Evelyn smiled. Exactly. If he sues me, I continued, my mind racing, catching up to her strategy. Then I have to be deposed, and he has to be deposed. It opens the door to discovery. Precisely, Evelyn said. He is handing us the keys to his own destruction. He is so arrogant he thinks he can control the narrative in a courtroom. He has no idea that we want him under oath. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. But a lawsuit takes months, she said, and I do not have months of patience. I want him broken now. I want him to lose the one thing he values more than money, his reputation. I said, the Wexford Foundation. Annual gala is in 2 days. Evelyn said, it is being held at the Glass Harbor Atrium in Milwaukee. It is the biggest social event of the season. Senators, investors, the press, everyone will be there. Cal will be there, I said. He never misses it. He loves to pretend he is still part of the Wexford legacy. He is not just attending, Evelyn said. He is scheduled to accept an award, the Pillar of the Community Award. He bought it, of course, with a donation he made 2 months ago using your money. I felt a cold burn in my throat. He is going to accept an award for being a good man. We are going to let him, Evelyn said. We are going to let him put on his tuxedo. We are going to let him walk that red carpet. We are going to let him stand on that stage and bathe in the applause. And then, Evelyn said, turning to me, you are going to take the microphone. Me? I asked. I am not a public speaker. I check compliance forms. You are the witness. Evelyn said, and you are the victim. The world needs to see you, not the crazy girl Mason described. They need to see the heiress who survived. I spent the next 24 hours in a fugue state of preparation. Evelyn hired a speech coach, a former crisis manager for Washington politicians. We sat in the library, dissecting my trauma and rearranging it into a weapon. No tears, the coach said, pacing around me. Tears make people pity you. Pity is weak. We want outrage. We want shock. When you talk about the cold, do not tell them how you felt. Tell them the temperature, -10 degrees. Tell them the facts. I stood in front of the mirror, reciting the lines. I stood barefoot on the ice. I watched them open gifts. I was not a daughter. I was a nuisance. I stripped the emotion out of my voice until it was as sharp and cold as the icicles hanging from the eaves. I was building a trap made of words, but there was one piece missing, the night before the gala. I sat with Evelyn in the study. The fire was dying down. The tape is good, I said, but it is 20 years old. A good lawyer will argue it is doctored, or that Cal was under duress, or that Dr. Eris was mistaken. We need a person. We need someone alive who can point a finger at him. Darren is in hiding, Evelyn said, and he was just a security guard. His testimony is powerful, but it is circumstantial. Then we have nothing that locks him away for good. I said, we have fraud, we have theft, but the murder, he might walk. Evelyn reached into her blazer pocket. She pulled out a photograph. It was a recent picture, taken with a telephoto lens. It showed a man in his 60s, balding, wearing a golf shirt, getting into a silver Mercedes. Dr. Eris was the hero of that night. Evelyn said, he fought for your mother, and Cal destroyed his career for it. But Eris was not the one who signed the death certificate. Eris refused. So Cal had the hospital administration bring in a resident, a young, ambitious, morally flexible resident who was willing to overwrite the senior doctor's notes in exchange for a recommendation and a fellowship grant. I looked at the photo. Who is this Dr. Marcus Sterling? Evelyn said, currently the chief of surgery at a private clinic in Chicago. He signed the certificate, I asked. He signed it, Evelyn said. He falsified the cause of death. He wrote accidental fall when the chart said homicide. He is the reason the police investigation stopped. I looked at the man's face. He looked soft, comfortable. Does he know we know he does now? Evelyn said. Jonah paid him a visit this afternoon. He played him a snippet of the tape, specifically, the part where Cal mentions that he can make problems go away. Jonah reminded Dr. Sterling that there is no statute of limitations on being an accessory to murder, and Evelyn leaned forward. The firelight caught the steel in her eyes. He cracked, she said. He is terrified. He has a life now, grandchildren, a reputation. He thought this was buried forever. When he realized we have the tape and the intake forms, he offered us a deal. What kind of deal? He will testify. Evelyn said. He will admit that he was coerced. He will admit that the medical records were altered at Cal's request. He will point the finger at Cal to save himself from going down for the full count. I felt a shiver go down my spine. This was it. This was the nail in the coffin. Is he coming to the gala? I asked. Evelyn nodded. He will be backstage, waiting for his cue. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. In 20 hours, I would walk into a room filled with the people who had helped Cal build his lie. I would walk onto a stage and burn it all down. I am ready, I said. Evelyn poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. She handed one to me. To the truth, she said. To the recall, I replied. We clinked glasses. The sound was sharp, like a gavel striking a block. The trap was set. All we needed now was for the rat to walk in. The Glass Harbor Atrium in Milwaukee was designed to make human beings feel small. It was a cathedral of vanity, a soaring structure of steel and tempered glass that jutted out over the frozen surface of Lake Michigan. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume, catering sternos, and the metallic tang of old money. I stood near the entrance, clutching a flute of sparkling water that I had no intention of drinking. I was wearing a gown Evelyn had chosen, a midnight blue silk that draped over my body like liquid armor. My hair was pulled back, exposing my face, exposing the scars I carried on the inside, to the 300 guests milling around senators, venture capitalists, local celebrities. I looked like Lila Hudson, the fortunate granddaughter of the Wexford dynasty, but inside the silk, I was still shivering. My toes, hidden inside velvet heels, still remembered the numbness of the snow. My skin still pricked with the phantom bite of the wind. I was not just an heiress attending a gala. I was a ghost who had walked back in from the cold to haunt the living. Evelyn stood beside me. She was in black, severe and regal, leaning on her cane with a deceptively casual air. She nodded to a man in a tuxedo who was the mayor of Milwaukee. "Stand straight, Lila," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "Do not let them see you flinch. They are like dogs. They can smell fear." "I am not afraid," I said, and it was mostly true. I was not afraid of them. I was afraid of what I was about to do. We moved through the crowd. I felt eyes on me. Whispers trailed in our wake like the train of a dress. "Is that the granddaughter I thought she was estranged? She looks intense." We reached the front of the room, near the stage. The tables were set with white linens and crystal centerpieces that caught the strobe lights. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of setting my father lived for. And then, he arrived. I expected him to sneak in. I expected him to be nervous. But Cal Hartman did not know how to be nervous because he did not believe he was capable of doing wrong. He walked through the main doors like he was the guest of honor. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, the lapels sharp, his bow tie immaculate. He was not alone. Flanking him were 2 men in dark suits, his attorneys. Sharks I recognized from the letterhead on the cease and desist order. Behind them trotted a woman with an iPad and a frantic expression, his crisis PR manager. He moved through the room, shaking hands, clapping men on the back, flashing that wide, white smile that had charmed my mother into a grave. He looked healthy. He looked rich. He looked like the pillar of the community he was about to be awarded for being. He saw me. He did not stop. He did not look guilty. He walked straight toward us, his entourage parting the crowd for him. He stopped 3 feet away. The PR woman looked nervous, but Cal looked serene. "Lila," he said. His voice was warm, dripping with a fatherly concern that made my stomach turn. "I am so glad you came to your senses." He looked at Evelyn. His eyes tightened, but the smile remained fixed. And Evelyn, a miracle of modern medicine, or perhaps just a very long vacation, Evelyn looked at him as if he were a stain on the carpet. "Enjoy your evening, Cal. It will be memorable." Cal laughed, a rich baritone sound that made people at the nearby tables smile at him. "Oh, I intend to. I am picking up an award, after all. And then, Lila, we are going to have a long talk about this little rebellion of yours. My lawyers have explained the situation to the board. We are going to get you the help you need." He reached out and patted my arm. His hand was heavy. It felt like a shackle. "You look tired." "Honey," he whispered, "do not worry. Daddy is going to fix everything." He walked away, heading to the VIP table at the very front, right next to the stage. He sat down, adjusted his cufflinks, and waved to a judge sitting across the aisle. I watched him, I realized then that the most dangerous thing about Cal was not his anger. It was his delusion. He genuinely believed that he could spin this. He believed that if he smiled bright enough and spoke confidently enough, the reality of locking his daughter in the snow would just dissolve. He was a monster who was convinced he was the hero. I looked around for Mason. I found him near the bar. He was holding his phone up, filming himself. He looked pale, sweaty, and frantic. He was trying to do damage control in real time. I could read his lips as he spoke to his screen. Ignore the rumors. Guys, my sister is here. She is fine. See family unity. He turned the camera toward Cal, trying to get a shot of our father looking successful. But at that exact moment, a security guard stepped into Cal's path to check his credential. Cal, thinking he was off camera, shoved the guard's arm away and snarled something that looked like, "Do you know who I am?" Mason quickly panned the camera away, looking terrified. He had just live-streamed his father assaulting a staff member to however many people were watching. The house of cards was trembling, but it had not fallen yet. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. The gala was beginning. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with perfect hair and a voice like velvet, walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 25th Annual Wexford Foundation Gala. Tonight, we celebrate the legacy of generosity that built this city. Applause rippled through the room. Cal clapped the loudest, his head held high. I sat at my table, my hands folded in my lap. I was vibrating. This was it. The trap was set. The doors were closed. The cameras were rolling. We have a special surprise tonight. The MC announced, for years, the Wexford family has been represented by trustees, but tonight, we are honored to welcome back the direct heir to the legacy. Please welcome Ms. Lila Hudson. The spotlight swung through the darkness. It hit me. The light was blinding, hot and white. I stood up. The applause was polite, curious. I walked toward the stairs. My legs felt heavy, but I forced them to move. Left, right, left, right. I could feel Cal's eyes on me. He was smiling, probably thinking I was about to give a speech he had approved, or perhaps a stumbling, nervous apology that would prove his point about my incompetence. I walked up the stairs. I took the podium. The microphone stand was cold silver. I looked out at the sea of faces, 300 people, the wealthy, the powerful, the complicit. I looked at Cal. He was sitting 10 feet away, right below me. He raised his glass to me, a toast, to my control over you. I looked at the teleprompter. It had the speech the PR team had prepared weeks ago, before Evelyn's return. Good evening. I am honored to continue my grandmother's work. I looked down at my hands. I was holding the index cards with the safe speech Evelyn and I had practiced. The one that was strategic, but then I thought of the photocopy in my pocket. I thought of the bruises on my mother's arms. I thought of the thud of the deadbolt sliding home on Christmas Eve. Strategy was good, but truth was better. I placed the index cards on the podium, and then, deliberately, I pushed them off the edge. They fluttered down like white feathers, landing on the floor near Cal's polished shoes. The room went silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a heartbeat. Cal's smile faltered. He lowered his glass. I leaned into the microphone. I did not shout. I did not cry. I spoke with the voice of a compliance officer reading a safety violation. On the night of December 24th, I stood on a wooden porch in Frostwood, Minnesota. My voice echoed through the massive atrium. The feedback whined slightly, then cleared. The temperature was minus 10 degrees Celsius. The wind chill was minus 20. I was wearing one boot. I was wearing no coat. I was locked out. A murmur ran through the crowd. People glanced at each other. This was not the speech they expected. I was locked out by the man sitting in the front row. I continued, looking directly at Cal, because I told him I was done apologizing for my existence. Cal stood up. It was a sharp, violent movement. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Lila, he barked. His voice carried without a microphone. That is enough. You are unwell. The MC looked panicked. He looked at the sound booth, unsure if he should cut the mic. I kept talking, I did not speed up. He threw my coat into the snow. I said, he watched me through the window while he ate roast beef. He laughed, and he waited for the cold to do what he has been trying to do for 20 years. Erase me. Ladies and gentlemen, Cal shouted, turning to the crowd, his arms spread wide. My daughter is having an episode. She has been under tremendous stress. We need a doctor. He was trying to command the room. He was trying to turn the gala into a medical emergency. He signaled to his security team. Get her off the stage. 2 large men in suits started toward the stairs, but I was not done. I am not having an episode. Father, I said, my voice was steel. I am giving a deposition. I reached into the podium. I had taped a small remote control to the underside of the wood earlier that afternoon. I pressed the button. Behind me, the massive projection screen that was displaying the Wexford Foundation logo flickered. The image changed. It was not a picture of a charity project. It was a bank statement. The font was massive. Everyone in the back row could read it. Wexford Family Trust. Balance. $0. And next to it, a flowchart, the one Sarah had drawn. The arrows pointing from the trust to Hartman Ridge Capital to L&M Interiors. This is where the money for the new wing of the hospital came from. I said, it was stolen from the fund meant to help domestic violence survivors. It was stolen by Calvin Hartman. The room erupted. The polite veneer shattered. People were standing up, pointing at the screen. Cameras were flashing blindingly. Cal was red in the face. He was not smiling anymore. The mask had fallen off, hitting the floor with a crash. Cut the feed, Cal screamed at the sound booth. Cut it now. But the sound guy was not looking at Cal. He was looking at Evelyn, who was standing by the control board, her hand resting on the shoulder of the technician. Evelyn gave a small nod. The feed stayed on. Cal turned back to me. He looked at the screen, then at me. He realized he could not talk his way out of the math. The numbers were up there, glowing in high definition. You ungrateful bitch, he hissed. He moved. He did not wait for security. He charged the stairs himself. He moved with the same speed he had used in the kitchen, the speed of a man who solves problems with his fists. He hit the first step. He looked like he was going to kill me. Right there, on stage, in front of the mayor, in front of the press, and that was exactly what we wanted. I did not step back. I stood my ground, gripping the podium. Come on, Cal, I thought, show them who you really are. Mason, standing by the shrimp tower, was still streaming. He was paralyzed with horror, but his phone was steady. He was broadcasting his father charging at his sister with murder in his eyes to 10,000 live viewers. Cal reached the top of the stairs. He lunged for the microphone. You are finished, he screamed, his spit flying in the stage lights. You are nothing. I made you, and I will break you. He grabbed my arm. His grip was just as painful as it had been on Christmas Eve, but this time I was not alone in a blizzard. The moment his hand touched me, the flashbulbs went off like a supernova, 1,000 pictures of the pillar of the community assaulting a woman on stage, and then, from the wings of the stage, a shadow moved. It was not security. It was a man in a gray suit, holding a microphone of his own, a man with a face that looked like it had been eroded by 20 years of guilt. Dr. Marcus Sterling walked into the light. Cal froze. He still had his hand on my arm. He looked at the doctor. You? Cal whispered. Doctor. Sterling looked at me, then at the audience. He was trembling, but he held the microphone up. Let her go. Mr. Hartman, the doctor said. His voice was amplified through the speakers. Cal released me as if I were burning. He stepped back. What are you doing here? Cal demanded. I am here to correct the record. Dr. Sterling said. He turned to the audience. My name is Dr. Marcus Sterling. 20 years ago, at St. Elwyn Medical Center, I signed a death certificate for Marin Wexford. The room went deathly silent. Even the camera shutters stopped. I certified the cause of death as accidental. Sterling said, but that was a lie. Cal lunged at the doctor. Shut up! You shut your mouth! But before Cal could reach him, Two uniformed officers stepped out from the curtain. They did not move toward me. They moved toward Cal. They blocked his path. I lied because this man threatened to destroy my career. Sterling continued, his voice shaking but clear. I lied because he held the power of attorney. But the truth is, Maren Wexford did not die from a fall. She died because Calvin Hartman refused to let us operate on the brain bleed caused by his assault. A gasp went through the room. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the atrium. Cal looked around. He looked at the police. He looked at the doctor. He looked at the screen showing his theft. He looked at the audience, whose faces had turned from admiration to horror. He was surrounded. The stage he had built for his glory had turned into a scaffold. He turned to me. His eyes were wild, desperate. Lila. He pleaded. Lila, tell them I am your father. Tell them I love you. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had defined my worth by my silence for 3 decades. I leaned into the microphone one last time. You are not my father. I said, you are just the man who locked me out, and tonight I am changing the locks. I pointed to the back of the room. Play the tape, I said. The speakers crackled, and then the sound of a voice from the grave filled the glass hall. I am telling you, doctor, you are not opening her skull. Cal's knees gave way. He collapsed onto the stage floor, a small broken figure under the unforgiving lights. The gala was over. The trial had begun. The audio recording ended with a final, mechanical click that echoed off the glass walls of the atrium like a gunshot. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was not the polite silence of an audience waiting for the next speech. It was the horrified silence of a room full of people realizing they had been applauding a monster. The recording of Cal's voice cold, transactional, bargaining with my mother's life hung in the air. Dismantling 20 years of his carefully cultivated image in less than 60 seconds, Cal scrambled up from the floor. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his face a map of panic and rage. He looked at the faces in the front row, the mayor, the bank presidents, the socialites. He saw their expressions: disgust, shock, recoil. He realized the ground was crumbling beneath him. So he did what he always did. He attacked. He lunged for the microphone stand I was gripping. He did not get it, but he grabbed the one Dr. Sterling was holding. It is a lie, Cal screamed, his voice cracking, booming through the speakers. This is a fabrication. You are listening to a deepfake. My daughter is mentally unstable. She has been brainwashed by that woman. He pointed a trembling finger at Evelyn, who stood in the wings, watching him with the impassive judgment of an executioner. Lila is sick, Cal shouted, turning back to the crowd, sweating under the lights. She has been off her medication for weeks. She is hallucinating. I loved my wife. I did everything to save her. This is a sick, twisted revenge plot. He was good, even now, cornered and exposed. He was charismatic. I saw a few people in the back rows hesitate. He was betting on their doubt. He was betting that the lie he had told for 2 decades was stronger than the truth I had just revealed. I stepped forward. I did not retreat. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a coolness that had nothing to do with the winter outside. I am not here for revenge. Cal, I said. My voice was steady, cutting through his hysteria. Revenge is for people who have something to lose. I have already lost everything you could take from me. I looked at the crowd. I am here to give my mother her name back. She did not die in an accident. She was not clumsy. She was a woman who tried to leave, and you made sure she never walked out of that garage. She fell, Cal roared. It was ice. I pointed to the massive screen behind me. The flowchart of the money laundering was still there, glowing like a neon indictment. And did the ice also forge my signature on the withdrawal slips for the Wexford Trust, I asked. Did the ice transfer $6 million to a shell company in the Cayman Islands? Did the ice pay for the suit you are wearing right now? Cal froze. The financial evidence. He could argue about the tape. He could argue about memories. But he could not argue with the math. The numbers on the screen were absolute. He looked at the screen. then back at me. The realization hit him. I had not just come with a story, I had come with a forensic audit. That is an accounting error, Cal stammered. A misunderstanding. I was managing the assets for your benefit. I turned to Dr. Sterling. The doctor looked terrified, but he stepped into the light. He held up a document, a blue-backed legal affidavit. Dr. Sterling, I said, tell them, is the tape a fabrication? The doctor shook his head. He looked at Cal, and for the first time, he did not look afraid of him. He looked ashamed. No, Sterling said into his microphone. It is not a fabrication. That is my voice on the recording, and that is Cal Hartman's voice. Sterling turned to the audience, holding the affidavit high. I have submitted a sworn statement to the district attorney as of an hour ago. Sterling announced, I have admitted to falsifying the death certificate of Maren Wexford in 1998. I did so under duress and blackmail from Calvin Hartman. The crowd gasped. It was a sharp, collective intake of breath. The press photographers, who had been stunned into stillness, suddenly surged forward. The flashes began to pop like strobe lights, a blinding storm of white light capturing Cal's disintegration. Cal looked at Sterling. You traitor, he hissed. You dirty little coward. I own you. You own nothing, I said. I signaled to the sound booth again. The screen changed. It was no longer the bank statements. It was a video. The video from 2 nights ago, the one Mason had tried to delete. It showed me standing on the porch, one boot on, shivering in the whiteout. It showed the thermometer reading -10 degrees. And then, the audio from inside the house. Look at her. Cal's voice on the video sneered. She looks like a vagrant. Let her freeze for a bit. It builds character. And then, the sound of laughter. Lynn's laughter. Mason's laughter. The ballroom was in uproar. Chairs were knocked over as investors stood up to leave. The mayor was hurriedly being escorted out by his security detail, desperate to distance himself from the toxic fallout. The noise was deafening shouting, accusations, the clatter of silverware dropping onto china. Cal looked around. His world was not just ending, it was exploding. He looked at the exits. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the final shift. The mask was gone completely. There was no father left. There was only a cornered animal. You ruined it, he whispered. You ruined everything. He dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud. He ran at me. It was not a performance this time. He lowered his shoulder and charged, his hands reaching for my throat. He wanted to silence the witness. He wanted to crush the source of the truth. I did not move. I did not flinch, because I knew something he did not. Before he could reach me, a wall of dark suits materialized from the wings of the stage. Federal marshals. They hit him hard. One of them tackled Cal at the waist. Driving him into the podium, the wood splintered. Cal went down, screaming, thrashing, cursing. Get off me! I am Calvin Hartman. I am the victim here. 2 more officers were on him instantly. I watched as they pulled his arms behind his back. I heard the metallic click-click of handcuffs. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard, sweeter than any symphony, sweeter than any apology. Calvin Hartman. A marshal shouted over the noise. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and suspicion of homicide in the 2nd degree. Cal was hauled to his feet. His bow tie was crooked. His hair was wild. He looked at me, his eyes bulging. Lila, he screamed. Fix this. Tell them to stop. I am your father. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at him. I revoked that title. I said softly. They dragged him away. The cameras followed him. A swarm of vultures feeding on the carcass of his reputation. But we were not done. I looked toward the side exit, the one designated for VIPs. A woman in a red dress was trying to push through the emergency doors. She was moving fast, clutching a diamond-encrusted clutch to her chest. Lynn. She had seen the flowchart. She had seen her name connected to L&M Interiors. She knew that bookkeeper was just a polite word for accomplice. She pushed the crash bar, but the door did not open. 2 uniformed police officers were waiting on the other side. They stepped in, blocking her path. Lynn Hartman, one officer asked. No, she shrieked, backing away. I didn't do anything. I just signed what he told me to sign. I don't know anything about money. I'm just a housewife. The officer held up a warrant. We have your signature on 24 counts of wire fraud and money laundering, ma'am, and we have the bank records from the shell company registered in your name. You have the right to remain silent. Lynn looked around wildly. She saw her friends' women she had lunched with, women she had bragged to staring at her with open contempt. She saw the photographers turning their lenses toward her. Mason, she screamed. Mason, help me. Call the lawyer. I looked for Mason. My brother was standing near the shrimp tower, where he had been all night. He was holding his phone, but he was not filming anymore. His arm was down at his side. He was staring at the screen. His face the color of chalk. He had been live-streaming the entire time. He had live-streamed the tape. He had live-streamed Dr. Sterling's confession. He had live-streamed Cal's arrest, and he had live-streamed his mother being handcuffed. He looked up and met my gaze across the chaotic room. He looked small. The arrogance, the influencer persona, the ring light bravado, it was all gone. He realized that the digital footprint he loved so much had just become the evidence that would convict his family. Police officers were moving toward him too. They did not have handcuffs for him yet, but they had a subpoena. I saw an officer take the phone from his hand. Mason did not resist. He looked like a child whose toy had been taken away, realizing that the game was not a game anymore. The room was clearing out. The gala had dissolved into a crime scene. Evelyn walked onto the stage. She moved slowly, her cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floorboards. She came to stand beside me. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply looked at the empty space where Cal had been standing. It is done, she said. I looked at the screen, which was still frozen on the image of the empty trust fund. No, I said. I turned to look at her. The money is gone, but the truth is here. I looked out at the journalists who were still frantically typing on their phones, broadcasting the fall of the House of Hartman to the world. Let them write it, I said. Let them write that he didn't win. Evelyn put a hand on my shoulder. He lost the moment you decided to survive the cold, she said. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The shaking was gone. The numbness was gone. I felt the heat of the stage lights, the adrenaline in my veins, the solid ground beneath my feet. The dominoes had all fallen. The trap had sprung, and I was the only one left standing on the stage. I took a deep breath. It tasted like victory, not the loud, shouting victory of a battle won, but the quiet, clean victory of a cancer removed. Let's go, I said to Evelyn. I want to see the snow from the other side of the glass. We walked off the stage, leaving the microphone, the broken podium, and the ruin of my father's life behind us. We walked toward the exit, not running, not hiding. We walked straight through the center of the room, and this time, when the crowd parted, it was not out of politeness, it was out of respect. I watched from the heavy glass doors of the atrium as the flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky. It was a chaotic ballet of justice. The press had been pushed back behind a velvet rope that had once signified exclusivity, but now served as a barrier for a crime scene. Cal Hartman was being led toward the back of a squad car. He was not walking with the swagger of the man who had owned Frostwood. He was hunched over, his tuxedo jacket bunching awkwardly around his shoulders where his hands were cuffed behind his back. He looked smaller, without the fear he instilled in others to prop him up. He was just a man. He was just a 60-year-old man who had run out of rooms to hide in. He tried to duck his head to avoid the cameras, but there were too many of them. The flashbulbs were relentless, capturing his shame in high definition. For the first time in my life, he was not the protagonist of the story. He was the cautionary tale. I expected to feel a surge of triumph. I expected to feel the burning satisfaction of victory that they talk about in movies. But as the police officer placed a hand on Cal's head to guide him into the back seat, I did not feel joy. I felt a sudden, massive hollowness. It was the feeling of a war ending. The silence after the artillery stops is not peaceful immediately. It is just empty. Evelyn stood beside me. She did not look at the police cars. She looked at me. "Are you all right?" she asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the atrium was still warm, but the air coming through the open doors was sharp and cold. "I feel light," I said. "I feel like I have been wearing a suit of lead armor for 30 years, and someone just cut the straps." Evelyn nodded. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was warm, grounding. "You are free. Lila. The cage is gone. The keeper is gone." We walked out to her car. The driver held the door open. We did not look back at the atrium, at the shattered gala, or at the people inside who were frantically trying to scrub their social media feeds of any association with my father. The drive back to the estate was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the drive down. It was not the silence of tension. It was the silence of a clean slate. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire heiress reveals family secrets. Frostwood fraud. Cal Hartman arrested. The truth about Marin Wexford. I did not read them. I did not click on the articles. I did not watch the news clips. I let the lawyers handle the fallout. I let the forensic accountants tear through the wreckage of Cal's shell companies. I let the district attorney build the homicide case against him using the tape and Dr. Sterling's testimony. I had work to do. 3 days later, Evelyn told me to pack a bag. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Chicago, no," she said. "We are going home." We drove north. Back across the state line, back into Minnesota, back to Frostwood. My heart hammered against my ribs as we approached the town limits. The snow was falling again, thick and heavy, turning the world into a soft white blur. It looked exactly like it had on Christmas Eve. The trees were coated in ice. The wind was blowing across the frozen lakes. We drove past the turnoff for Cal's house. I looked up the hill. The house was dark. The driveway was unplowed. A smooth sheet of white. There were no lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimney. The bank had already slapped a foreclosure notice on the gate, and the crime scene tape fluttered in the wind like a tattered flag. It looked like a tomb. We did not stop there. The car kept moving, winding around the lake, past the town square, and up a different ridge. This was the older part of Frostwood, where the trees were thicker and the houses were smaller, built to survive the winter rather than to show off. The car slowed and turned into a narrow, tree-lined driveway. It stopped in front of a cottage. It was not a grand estate. It was a single-story house made of cedar and stone, with a steep roof to shed the snow and a wide front porch that looked out over the frozen water of majestic Lake Superior in the distance. Smoke was curling lazily from the stone chimney. Warm, yellow light spilled from the windows, staining the snow gold. Evelyn opened her purse. She pulled out a single brass key on a simple leather fob. She held it out to me. "What is this?" I asked. The Wexford Trust had many assets. Evelyn said, most of them were liquid, which is how Cal stole them, but there were some real estate holdings he did not know about because they were held in my personal name. "Not the Trust's. I bought this place the year you were born. I thought your mother might need a safe place to run to." She looked at the cottage, her eyes misty. "She never made it here, but you did. I took the key." It was cold metal, but it warmed quickly in my palm. "It is yours." "Lila," Evelyn said, "it is not a loan. It is not a rental. It is titled to you, free and clear. No one can lock you out of this house. No one can throw your coat off this porch. You hold the only key." I stepped out of the car. The snow crunched under my boots. The air was -5 degrees, but I did not feel the chill. I walked up the steps. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly, with a satisfying click. I pushed the door open. Inside, there was a fire crackling in the wood stove. There was a soft rug on the floor. There was a kitchen with a copper kettle waiting on the burner. It smelled of pine and cinnamon. It smelled of safety. I walked to the window and looked out. I could see the snow falling, swirling in the wind, but I was on the inside. I spent the next 6 months rebuilding my life from that cottage. I did not go back to Chicago. I resigned from Cedar and Lark Holdings with a polite email. I was done checking boxes for other people. I used the recovered funds, what was left of the $14 million after the lawyers and the fines, to start something new. I did not want to just sit on the money. That money had blood on it. It needed to be cleaned. It needed to be put to work. I launched the Marine Initiative. It was not a charity that threw galas. It was a tactical operation. We worked within the Wexford ecosystem to provide immediate, high-security extraction and legal support for women and children trying to escape domestic violence. We provided the one thing my mother didn't have a way out that didn't involve a body bag. I sat in my small study, overlooking the lake, reviewing case files. We hired Darren Klein as our head of security. He moved his family up from Iowa, and for the first time in 20 years, the man walked with his head up. He was no longer the guard who looked away. He was the guard who opened the gate to safety. One afternoon in July, my phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the screen. It was a text message. The number was familiar, though I had deleted it from my contacts months ago. Mason, I opened the message. It was long, rambling. Lila, I know you probably won't answer. I just wanted to say I am sorry. Mom is in a facility. She is not handling the indictment well. I am working at a warehouse in St. Paul. It sucks. I didn't know. Lila, I really didn't know he killed her. I thought we were just a normal family. Can we talk, please? I looked at the words. I thought about the boy who had laughed while I froze. I thought about the young man who had live-streamed my humiliation for likes. I thought about his silence when Cal threw my boots. I did not feel hate. Hate takes energy. Hate requires you to carry the person with you. I had put Mason down a long time ago. I typed a reply. I did not offer forgiveness. I did not offer money. I offered him the truth, which was the only thing I had left to give. I am glad you are working, Mason, but I cannot carry your guilt for you. You have to walk your own road now. I hesitated, then added 3 final words. I am busy living. I pressed send, then I blocked the number. I closed the laptop. It was late December again. The anniversary was approaching. Evelyn arrived at the cottage just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. She brought a bottle of wine and a box of old vinyl records she had found in storage. We cooked dinner together. Simple food, a stew, bread. We ate at the small wooden table near the window, watching the storm roll in over the lake. The forecast called for heavy snow, temperatures dropping to -15 degrees. We sat by the fire, listening to the wind howl around the eaves. It was the same sound that had terrified me a year ago, the sound of the predator, the sound of death. But tonight, it was just the wind. It was just weather. Evelyn poured the wine. The firelight danced in the glass. Do you remember, she asked softly. Everything. I said, do you regret it? She asked. Going back that night, I took a sip of wine. I looked at the flames. No. I said, if I hadn't gone back, I would still be in Chicago. I would still be apologizing. I would still be wondering why I felt so cold all the time. I looked at Evelyn. That night when he locked the door, he thought he was ending me. He thought he was throwing me away. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. But he was wrong. He wasn't locking me out of my home. He was locking me out of his prison. He forced me to stand in the cold so I could finally see the warmth of the car coming up the driveway. Evelyn raised her glass. To the open door, she said. To the recall. I replied. We sat there in the silence. 2 women who had survived the fire and the ice. Outside, the snow piled up against the walls, burying the world in white. But inside, the fire was hot. The walls were solid. And for the first time in 32 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a heavy journey, but I'm grateful you walked it with me. I would love to know where you are listening from right now. Are you safe and warm in your own home? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear that the door to their new life is waiting to open. Stay safe and never apologize for existing.